Hi everyone, I'm Chef Susie with This Cafe Online. Welcome to our live session this morning. Today we're going to be exploring a different kind of dessert. This is a dessert that we're familiar with, the lemon meringue pie. But what we're going to do is we're going to deconstruct this and we're going to serve it outside of its traditional state. And when you hear these deconstructed desserts, they are sometimes a little bit on the contemporary side when they're plated. And you can do these in a variety of ways. I know that mason jars are really popular right now. And what you can do is put the components of the dessert separately in a jar or a glass or even on a plate, and just a very unique way of presenting these classic desserts. So I chose the lemon meringue pie today because it's something that we're all familiar with, and this is something that you could do with limitless common desserts. You could do the apple pie as well, and black forest cake is another fun one to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to make each of these components separate. And for example, for the lemon meringue pie, I have some toasted meringues that I made. And we're also going to do a little bit of piped and browned meringue on the plate. And then I have some sable cookies. And this is going to be the dough for the, which would be the dough for the lemon meringue pie. So we're going to go ahead and make a little bit of pâte sablé, and that's what we're going to use for these cookies. And I'm going to show you how to make this really quick, and then we will move on to our composition of the dessert. So please let me know if you have any questions. Oh, I got my kikis falling off here. All right. So for the pâte sablé, I've got some softened butter and some sugar. So I'm going to be adding a little bit of egg yolk. I've got my vanilla right in here with my egg yolk, so I don't forget it. I have a little bit of salt in here with my flour. Just a very basic dough. And what's nice about this dough is it freezes really well. So oftentimes you'll see this on a crust for a pie or a tart. And another common dough is the pâte brûlée, which is similar to the pie dough. Very strong dough, very neutral in flavor. So sometimes you'll see a sweet dough and sometimes you'll see more of a neutral dough as a pie dough. So I chose the pâte sablé because it's a cookie type of cookie type of texture, and I think that it complements the lemon meringue pie nicely. And knowing that, let's go ahead and make our pâte sablé. So like I said, I've got my unsalted softened butter with my sugar. We're just going to cream this together. And then we're going to be adding the egg yolks. And keep in mind, when you're making these kind of doughs, your ingredients are always going to be at room temperature. So I have my butter and my egg yolks at room temperature. This way it's going to emulsify in. If you're ever making one of these doughs where you're adding the fat, where you're adding the egg to the fat and sugar, and you see some separation and some curdling, that's from your ingredients not being the same temperature. So what you can do is you can wrap a warm towel around the bottom of your bowl, or you can set it in a little bit of warm water for a minute, and then go ahead and continue mixing. So you don't ever want to toss this mixture when it looks like that. It's just having a hard time coming together on its own, and it just needs a little bit of help, so you can definitely bring it back. Okay, so like I said, that can easily happen when your butter is too cold or your eggs are too cold. And sometimes we think things are at room temperature, but they're just not there yet. So please let me know if you have any questions. Like I said, super simple dough. What I like about this one is it's great for making cookies, and it freezes very well too. Okay. I'd like to add my egg yolks a little bit at a time. So this is going to be a richer dough, and it's going to have a little bit more of a yellow color to it because we're adding these egg yolks instead of the whole eggs. But I think that you're going to like this nice crispy texture. Okay, as you can see from this mixture, it's emulsifying together nicely. There's no separation at all. But like I said, if you have some separation, just warm it up somehow and it will come together. There's no need to toss things. We always try to save things before we toss them, and something like this will come together for you. Okay, so this is our fat and egg mixture and sugar. Okay, it's ready to go. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and add our flour. And then we'll have the finished pat sable dough. And please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, I was kind of mixing this in a little bit at a time here, just to get it started. Okay. This is going to look a little dry and crumbly in the beginning, but just give it a chance to come together. You don't want to overmix this because it could cause a little toughness and dryness. So usually don't mix this on too high. And it's coming together as a nice dough. It smells great too. You can smell the sweetness and you can smell the butter and the vanilla too. You can use a different extract if you like. Okay, so this is our pat sucré dough. What we're going to do is we're going to chill this before we roll it out. And I've got a little bit of dough that I have chilled that I prepared earlier, so we'll go ahead and roll that one out. And please let me know if you have any questions. Okay. Okay, so got a nice dough here. We're going to scrape this down a little bit. And then we're going to set it aside to chill. It's going to roll a lot better once it's been chilled. It's not going to be so sticky. Give that butter a chance to cool down a little bit, and then this is going to be bendable. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the dough that I made earlier. Okay, so I have a nice smooth little piece of pat sucré here, and it's chilled, so we're going to go ahead and roll this out. And when it comes to rolling, out your shapes and sizes, it's really limitless. It's really whatever you would like to do. So I've got some pieces that I made earlier. I cut some flower shapes as well as rounds and longs. And you're going to roll this about a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch thick. You don't want it to be too thick. You want this to be, this is going to be on a plate. So it's something that your guests will need to be able to eat with a fork and a knife. Okay, so be sure that you have enough flour underneath. You don't want too much. And this is going to help with any sticking when you roll this out. Okay, so I've just got a couple of cutters here. And what you can do too, if you feel like this has gotten too warm, you can go ahead and chill these pieces before you bake them, and that's going to help them retain their shape a little bit. So you can go ahead and put them on a plate or a tray. And just go ahead and freeze them. Like I said, the shapes and sizes are pretty limitless, what you can do with these. And you can also take your round cutter and you can make a little half moon as well. So those are a little fun to make. Those are pretty little shapes. And you have a little teardrop. So definitely have fun with these. You can also roll them with a cutter. I mean, you can cut them with a rolled cutter like this pizza cutter. And you can cut some long shapes too. You kind of want to square off these ends a little bit. And I'm not hearing any questions on anything, so please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put our dough away. And we do have a question.
How would it be accurate in determining the thickness?
We have a question on the accuracy in determining the thickness. What you can do is use a ruler. You can get a plastic ruler, and those are great to have in the kitchen so you can wash them easily. So you can measure with your ruler, and you can also use that for your squares or long shapes and sizes. You can mark them a little bit. But I would definitely, if you don't have a plastic ruler in your kitchen, this is something that you're going to want to have, because you can use it for a variety of things, cutting your brownies and cutting any bars as well as your cookie shapes. So please let me know if you have any other questions. All right, so we're going to move on to the meringue. Okay, let's clean up here a little bit. These bench scrapers are handy. What you can do is you can use these to cut some of your pieces as well. Okay. All right, so for the meringue, I whipped up some meringue earlier, just a few minutes before we started. Let's go ahead and see if it's holding its shape. What's nice about meringue is it can always be re-whipped if you need to re-whip it a little bit. So our meringue is holding its shape pretty well. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in a pastry bag. And this is just a simple meringue with egg whites and a little bit of granulated sugar. And make sure that you're putting a little cream of tartar in here as well. This is going to help bind this, and it's going to help dry it out too. It's an acidic ingredient. Some people use a little bit of lemon juice or a little bit of lime juice, which would complement this dessert nicely. So that would add a little bit of flavor, and that's fine too, as long as you have something a little bit acidic. Okay, so let's go ahead and pipe some shapes. Okay, so you can pipe these on a parchment or even a soap pad. I don't recommend using a grease pan because you want these to dry out. We're going to be putting them in the oven to dry out. So what I'll do is I'll anchor my pan. Got the oven preheated to 250 degrees. You want to stay at a low temperature because you're just drying these, you're not cooking them. So what you can do is you can do some round shapes. I kind of like the little tip effect on these. Okay, and you don't have to leave too much shape and too much space in between these because they're not going to grow. They're just going to dry. And you can make some different sizes. I made some small ones as well. Okay, so I think this gives you, excuse me, an idea of what you can do with the meringues when piping them. And like I said, these are going to go in the oven at 250 degrees to dry them out a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and set these aside. And really quick before I go, I used this tip. It's an Echo tip, and it's number 804 for piping these. And you can pretty much use any tip that you have or any tip that you like. And we have a question.
What is the difference between this dough and pâte à
Okay, so we have a question that what is the difference between this dough and pâte française dough? So there's some basic sweet doughs that you're going to be using in the pastry kitchen. Pâte française is one of them, pâte sable is another, and the pâte sucré is your third sweet dough, and then you have your neutral dough, your pâte brisée. So the pâte française, that dough is a little bit, for me, it's a little bit more of a stronger dough. and it's a little bit more not so cookie-like as this one is. And the pâte française, when you roll that one out, you'll typically have to roll it in between parchment or plastic because it could crack a little bit. So it is a little bit drier. And the pâte sablé is something that's definitely better for making cookies. What I like about it is it's versatile. I can make a batch, as I mentioned, I keep it in the freezer, and you can pull it out and you can make some shells with it, some tart shells or some cookies. So it's incredibly versatile, and it has a nice crispness to it and a nice flavor from the egg yolks in it. So I hope that helps answer your question. Okay, so like I said, the meringues, I used tip number 804. It has a pretty good opening on it for making the bigger ones, but you can pretty much use whichever tip you like. So knowing that, let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and assemble the dessert. Okay, so for the lemon part, I made a very simple lemon curd. And I've had this in the refrigerator. It's nicely chilled. And when you're composing these desserts, it's nice because you can be as creative as you want to be. So you can do different shapes and sizes, and it's really limitless what you can do. So we're going to share a recipe for the lemon curd because we made it in another session, so we're not going to make it again today. So another thing that's nice about this dessert, if you're doing it at home for your family or guests, or if you're making this in a restaurant, you can make all of these components ahead of time. You can make the cookies ahead of time. You can make your lemon curd ahead of time. I made this one last night. It's been in the refrigerator. And you can make your meringues ahead of time too. And then when the time comes, you can just do your assembly. So keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and start assembling our dessert. And please let me know if you have any questions along the way. So for the lemon curd, you can either pipe this or you can scoop it, whichever you like. I think I'm going to do a little bit of piping for a little bit more control. So lemon curd it has a good consistency to it. It's not really thick like custard would be, but there is some butter to this, which is going to lend to the setting of the lemon curd. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions on anything. So I've got a little lemon curd in my bag, and we're going to go ahead and assemble our dessert. Okay. So I mentioned earlier the meringue portion, you can dry them with this dessert, or you can even put a little bit of meringue on your plate and toast it. So that's what we're going to do to start out. And what you're going to want to do is do this toasting on the plate first before you assemble your dessert. Give it just a second to cool off, and then you can go ahead and finish your assembly. So I've got my torch here. I like to use these hardware store torches because you kind of go through a lot in the kitchen, but the smaller kitchen torches that you buy at kitchen stores are just fine. Okay, so we're just going to do a little bit of a meringue piping on our plate. And does anyone have any questions on anything so far? Okay, so let's go ahead and do a little bit of piping. So this is just going to be a little bit of a browned meringue component. We're going to go ahead and light our torch. You want to keep that facing away from you. There we go. These are a little strong, so you kind of want a little bit of a light flame on here. Okay, since I don't have anything on my plate, I'm just going to pick it up and brown it quickly. Give that meringue a nice brown color, and we are all set. Looks pretty, doesn't it? Okay, so let's go ahead and compose our dessert. We have a question.
Does the lemon curd consist of egg yolk and lemon only?
The lemon curd. Okay, so the lemon curd, let's talk about the lemon curd filling. You can do a couple different formulas for this. I like to use a whole egg recipe. It's got whole egg, sugar, and a little bit of lemon juice in it. Well, actually kind of a lot of lemon juice because it's pretty tangy. And mostly, curds are mostly found with egg yolks in them, but you will find some formulas that are a little bit lighter using the whole egg. And then you add some butter once it's thickened, and you just refrigerate this, and it's nice to keep on hand, and it can hold for a few days. Okay, so let's go ahead and assemble our dessert real quick here. Okay, so we've got our components. We've got our lemon curd. We've got our sable cookies, our toasted meringues. I've got a little bit of blueberry here, and I've got a little bit of raspberry coulis, and I've got some mint here. So this is pretty important, keeping your mint in cold water. If you're ever finding that your mint is very wilty on you, it's because it's getting a little dehydrated. So if you're in a restaurant, you're working at a station, you'll always have this in a little container with some cold water, maybe a few pieces of ice floating around in there. And see how beautiful it looks? You just have to dry it off before you use it. Okay, so back to composing our dessert. Okay, so firstly, we are going to put a little bit of this lemon curd down. So I'm going to put a little bit over here, and I'm going to put a couple of little dabs. And you can pretty much, use as much or as little as you want. It's really limitless, whatever your presentation is going to be. Okay, so I've got a little bit of graham cracker here with some butter and some cinnamon. This is also going to bring a little bit of crunch and a little bit of flavor to our dessert. And like I said, please let us know if you have any questions on anything. And super fun desserts to play around with. Like I said, they work so well in mason jars too. Okay, so let's go ahead and put a few of our meringues on here now. So these meringues, you can dry them where they are lighter in color. You're just going to, turn down the oven a little bit sooner. And I made these a little bit of a toasty brown color because I'm using a white plate today. Okay. So like I said, it's really limitless what you can do with these. So we're going to put a few of our sable cookies on here too. And please let me know if you have any questions. We're getting ready to say our goodbyes once our dessert is complete. And these are fun desserts to make, so definitely have some fun with your deconstructed desserts. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put a few blueberries on here. Some of our blueberries are a little squishy today. Okay, and I think I'm going to put a little piece of mint too. And like I said, you're going to want to dry this off a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and top this off with a little bit of raspberry sauce. And this will be our deconstructed lemon meringue pie. And please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so we added some nice color with our raspberry sauce. And thanks so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.